Welcome. I'm Greg Mikowski, the chair of the San Francisco Bay Area ACM. We're a local chapter of the Association of Computing Machinery. And tonight I wanted to introduce a talk on best practices in conducting remote research on the web. Well, let me tell you a little bit about ACM. Our local chapter was founded in 1957, and we are the Professional Computing Society for Computer Science. We support about 4,000 Bay Area professionals in computing services. So tonight I'd like to introduce a speaker, best practices for conducting remote research on the web. So Kyle will be talking about how the web empowers remote research. You could use this to investigate your products, your solutions, or services. So help me welcome Kyle Henderson.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the time and you guys all being here. And again, my name is Kyle Henderson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of YouEye. It's a company right here in Silicon Valley, downtown Mountain View, in fact. And we create agile research solutions for Fortune 500 e-commerce companies. But what I'm here to talk to you tonight about is remote research, and more specifically, agile research. And this has become a very pressing topic in the Valley over the last decade as we've changed our development methodologies in producing software. So I also want to throw into this is rapid prototyping. So I'm going to take you through the usual agile development process and the type of research we can do in that process. And I want to highlight some rapid prototyping abilities we have. One thing I'd like to say in talking about and framing agile research, though, it's the idea that I have a question about my product or my user or my company in the morning, and I can go through a series of methods or tools and have an answer in the evening. It's being able to be very rapid, very quick, and very agile in terms of getting direction and having data to prove it. So with our first slide, we kind of talked about what agile research is, but let's put a little more context. It's about market and behavioral research that works inside agile development. Now, let's get up to the next slide where we actually can see an agile development standard timeline. We have the usual prep, then requirements, design, development, testing, release. And this can happen on a 1 week, 2 week, 4 week iteration cycle. A lot of companies are doing this because it allows them to create products in bite-sized portions, get it out to their audience, and get feedback really quickly. Now, what's interesting is a lot of companies do all that except the getting feedback really quickly. So that's why agile research is very helpful. Now, how can this be done? So let's move to our next slide. And to do agile research, we're going to take this we're going to take this timeline and we're going to talk about the types of research methods that can be put into parts of the timeline. So our first one would be, in our next slide, would be interviews, surveys, and audience user tests that can be done before you start building your product. The next will be competitor reconnaissance. So we can learn what our competitors are doing and how they're doing it well before we decide how to do it better. More importantly, not make the mistakes they made. After we've done a bit of design phase, we can actually do codeless prototyping. And once we've done some development, we'll do a reaction group. And after we've cleared testing, we'll do final experience testing. Now, what I'm going to do throughout the rest of this talk is talk about each of these methods and tools that are available in between the gaps of agile development process. So our first here is after prep, and we're going to talk about interviews, surveys, and user tests. Now, there's a lot of different approaches and tools out there, but again, for it to be agile in terms of research, we're talking about what question can I ask in the morning and how can I get an answer in the evening. So when we're looking to do interviews and surveys and user tests, we need an audience. Quite often we'll go to our current user base. We will find or grow our own group of beta testers at times if we're doing something very early. And we'll give ourselves a community that we can leverage to improve our product. So with the next point of information, we're going to grow a feedback panel. Next point of information on interview surveys. So growing a feedback panel can be done in a few ways, and there's a few services available. One I'm a particular fan of is a service called Ethnio. Now, this is a SaaS service, so software as a service, that is on a monthly subscription plan, and it's very affordable. I believe its lowest tier is like $50 a month. So it's negligible for the amount of value it can deliver to you. And what happens is it puts a prompt onto your website. So when someone comes to your website, it selects a random portion or percentage of visitors, and we'll ask them if they will want to join your feedback community. It'll ask them a few questions about themselves, demographic type information, and it'll essentially put this into lists or groups or buckets inside Ethnio that you can use to ask questions of with surveys, or conduct user tests with, or use some of these other services that can get you information really quickly. And you could do something similar with a product like MadMimi or MailChimp. The idea that I can put some online forms online. So MadMimi and MailChimp, they go beyond just online emails. If you're familiar with those products, you can actually have online hosted forms. So you can have a link on your website, hey, join our beta group or join our feedback group. And you can collect people who are interested in giving you feedback. And quite often they're happy to do it for free. So that's always a perk when you're, let's say you're very early stage startup, maybe 2 or 3 people, and you're just looking to get some feedback. So other services out there for collecting the feedback, and this gets into some of the forms again, is MadMimi, yet again, Wufoo. SurveyMonkey is also very good for conducting surveys. And if you're going to do some user testing, there's a number of companies, my company being one of them, that you can ask someone to come to your product, your online website, your dynamic web application, even your mobile application doesn't always have to be on the web. And you can ask them to go through a workflow, say a sign-up process or a checkout process, or if it's Pinterest, please find lots of things you love on the web and add them to your pin board. And a user testing tool will allow you to invite anyone to record their screen, their front-facing camera, their microphone, while they're trying to go through this workflow. And you can actually get the kind of in the lab experience, or I'm on the couch with my real audience, watching them use my product, but you didn't have to go through all the work with all the logistics and rigmarole of scheduling that. You can actually just go click, 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 and within about an hour you have a series of videos showing up that is your audience working on your product, and you can see the mistakes they're making or the confusion they're encountering, or they're not quite comprehending what it is I'm trying to offer them. These types of aha moments, which are very, very valuable. So when we're talking about Agile research right after the prep session, we want to essentially build understanding, build empathy about our audience, for our audience, so that we can build a product that meets their needs. We want to understand them as well as they understand themselves, and sometimes we want to try and understand them more than they understand themselves. There's a little bit of an inside joke there, so feel free to laugh. Thank you. So if we get to our next slide over here, we'll talk about, and if you can see on the bottom here, we have prep and requirements. So we've informed ourselves, we've conceived an idea of a product or feature set that's going to either relieve some pain or provide some vitamins to my audience in some way. And one of the key things to do here is, well, let's educate myself on how other people solved this problem. And let's see what they did well, and let's see what they messed up so that we can do something better. So once you have that feature idea, let's go check out the competitors. You could track competitors with a service like changedetection.com. That's very, very helpful. It'll actually tell you when there's been a change to a competitor's site, or any site that you want for that matter. And it can actually be smart about sites that have dynamic content. It'll tell you when a real change happened. But there's also user testing your competitors. And this is something that a lot of our customers like to have done on a very regular basis, monthly. UI customers, that is. They like to get reports on what their key competitors are doing and changing, and how the audience, how their key demographics, how the community that they're trying to build a business on responds to the changes in those products, or that the new way they're pitching, or the new feature they've added, so that we can be better informed, so that your company or your project can be better informed about changes in the marketplace and which way the experience trend is taking the community. So let's get to the next step. That was a little bit of information about competitor reconnaissance. So we've done our prep, we have requirements, we've seen how other people have done it, we've talked to our audience, and now we're getting into this design period. We're actually going to start putting information onto a screen in some way and seeing how people are going to react to it. And this is where codeless prototyping comes in very, very handy. With the requirements gathered, you can have a designer. If, let's say you have some design shops, or you have a real designer on staff. You can, with a designer and a marketer, be able to, in a few hours, create the look, feel, and experience of a full dynamic web app without ever writing a line of code. So you can actually start testing something before you've put your most valuable and costly resources into making something, to make sure, one, am I relatively on the right track? And two, can I avoid all the potholes along the way before I've put all my precious resources into this? And there's a number of very effective services that will allow you to do this type of codeless prototyping. And we've all heard of wireframing, or actually, who's heard of wireframing here before? Good. Okay. So there's a number of good services out there for wireframing. I really like Balsamiq. They have a library of different components available to you that you can just drag and drop onto a screen and be able to, not even worry about drawing the wires. They'll give them to you. You can drop them in place, and then you can make them interactive and actually connect and create an entire sitemap, so you can have navigation through a wireframe. And you can host all this online. And then there's Pencil Project, and there's a series of other services out there. And those can be helpful because now I have something that's representative of what I want to build, and I can show it to others. And you could show it to others using a series of products. Actually, I want to talk about a product I'm actually a very, very big fan of. It's in this next category of high fidelity, but it has a perk as well. Envision is the name of this product. And the perk I want to talk about is you can actually host a wireframe or an image online and create a community conversation around it. You can have that beta group. You could send out a link to your feedback community, the panel that you grew, and send them to your Envision app image of your wireframe, or even a high fidelity mock. So this is getting a little ahead of myself now, but I get so excited talking about this in the Envision app. It's a very, very hot product. You could take your high fidelity mocks from like Photoshop, the pixel perfect mocks, right? And you can have all the different mocks of all the different pages on your site or your app. And you can actually hotspot connect and link them together so that it looks like it's the real thing. It feels mostly like it's the real thing. And you get a link I can shoot and share with anyone, and they'll see this. It fills their web browser as if it was a full website. And in conjunction with some of the services like the user testing services or in person, you can be taking these codeless prototypes and testing them as if they were the real thing, which is the wonderful thing about prototype, right? They're always a stand-in for the real thing. They're trying to represent the kernel of value that the true product is going to deliver. And with an app like Hot Glue or Envision app, you can do that. And then with some user testing, you can get out there and see the real thing. But it goes a step farther with codeless prototyping, because I have wireframes, I have high fidelity, things that mocks, prototypes that look perfect. But so much of the web and mobile and interaction nowadays has these subtleties to it. And it's really, interaction in general is something that's very, very, very valuable in terms of customer engagement, delight, and re-engagement. So a product that my company is very close to is called Agile, and it's perfect for doing interaction design. What Agile gives you is a desktop app that allows you to create an interface for a web application, but using a WYSIWYG editor, you can create dynamic rules for how that interface should react upon clicks, hovers, drags, all the different types of interactions you're used to online or on a mobile device. And you can do it in minutes. It's not rocket science. You can learn how to use this product over a weekend kind of thing. And now you can create the full interaction qualities and even throw in some of those high fidelity mocks on top of it or underneath it and be able to really capture the full quality effect of your product you're envisioning. And truthfully, I could have a marketer and a designer at my company. They could do a wireframe before lunch. They could do an Envision app conversation started after lunch and before the end of the day. And then the next morning they could have an Agile version ready to go, and there could be user testing having been done on all of this. So the morning, they went to lunch, they came back, they had videos to see if people digesting the wireframes. In the afternoon, they did the high fidelity, and they started a study, and the next morning they came back and they had videos of being able to watch people use their product concepts. And again, the next day after lunch, I have more feedback on people trying to use the interaction. So it greatly compresses the feedback process and the ability to build products that are actually audience-oriented, products that had the audience voice involved in creating them. So we found Codeless prototyping and why I wanted to mention it so much with Agile research as being extremely valuable to the bottom line of businesses. So much so that there's a great organization called Human Factors International, and they did a report using information from IEEE, very big standards, and I'm sure all of you guys know IEEE. I'm talking to the ACM. But there was a report by IEEE that was called Why Software Fails, and one of the key points about why software fails was there wasn't enough emphasis on user experience, understanding, research, and empathy building. There wasn't enough Agile research done ahead or in the process of developing software. And when it boiled right down to it, they found that if you add UX research or Agile research into this process, you can save yourself 50% of the cost of development. You can write a full product in half the amount of time. And in terms of dollars for a business, that is a huge, huge savings. And it's in terms of business and changing their processes, the cost of doing something like Agile research is a very, very, very small percentage of that 50% savings that you got yourself. But anyway, I wax there. So let's move on beyond Codeless prototyping, and let's move towards after development. And this is when we do a reaction group. And who here has heard of heuristic reviews before? It's something kind of it was more prevalent in the 90s and early aughts. It was the idea that I could hire a experienced professional or a design professional, and they'd come in and they'd tell me everything that was wrong with my site or my app. And a lot of people made this their livelihood, and they were paid obscene amounts of money at times to do this. And they did deliver value. But the issue is combine that with waterfall development, and you're only getting a review every 18 months at best, kind of thing, right? So what did I do with 18 months of my life? But anyway, I wax again. So a reaction group is about using a group of trusted customers or peers being professionals, like us. So my background was in design back in the day, so we'll find designers, we'll find product managers, we'll find marketers, we'll find analytics specialists, and we'll put them together as a group, and we'll give them even earlier releases than beta or earlier than alpha. We'll throw them into our QA system as things are coming through. And we'll use services such as Envision and Notable to collect their conversations. So it's actually really, very interesting. I can throw 5 web designers and 3 product managers into the QA server of my app, And they can literally start having conversations over all the different pages about what they would change, what could be better, how they saw other companies doing it. And then they can start arguments with themselves. And I'm just sitting back and I'm just like, man, this is amazing. Please deliver me all this value. And what we do for these reaction groups, and we use products like FNEO, where we reach out directly to people we knew on LinkedIn, let them know the products we're working on, would be interested for them to be involved in a way. We'll send them in some incentives sometimes, a gift card. We talk about hosting some parties for them every once in a while. And it's really, really valuable to have this peer group that has a professional opinion that they're willing to share. And sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, but it at least has some experience behind it. And we like doing that when our app is still in the QA session. And again, we'll also do user testing with this. So we'll use comment collection with Envision and Notable, and then we'll go back to our own product and user testing, because with those same peers, I'll actually throw them in there and ask them to go through a new workflow. Like, we totally redesigned a workflow. We changed the order. We added new interactions and new features. I want these people who are professionals and see these types of interfaces all the time to try and go through and navigate and understand my app. And I'll actually get to see them in their virgin experience with it. They can't hide their reaction, right? At that point, it's virgin. They're not prepped. They're at home in their own natural environment. They just got a link and they have this recording software that fires up. So it becomes very, very valuable to see people's honest reactions and be able to have us interpret them, have the insights built by seeing someone's reactions. So let's move on to the step after testing. And what I call this is called experience testing. And this is kind of, this is when you give the rubber stamp. It's another round of using targeted demographics or your actual customers to do one more, yes, everything is in order before I release these features out to the wild, out to the large public. And we use our own product, and there's a number of products out there for doing the user test. And it's just one more moment where I'll take 5 or 10 people, I'll run them through the product one more time to make sure there's no ahas or gotchas or anything like that. And when we do this type of testing, we're actually looking for there to be no problems whatsoever. So now we're kind of getting to be able to wrap up our process here. So let's go to our next slide. And we see the cycle is complete. And let's pull up our Agile process again here. And we saw prep, requirements, design, development, testing, release. And we reviewed interviews, surveys, and user tests you can do very early on. And again, this is something you can start in the morning and you can have answers in the evening. Then we built our requirements, and then we did some competitor reconnaissance to inform and inspire ourselves about what else is out there and how people have solved these problems in the past. And after doing some design work, we built Codeless prototypes so we could see and feel what our product would be like before we actually made our product. After development, we threw it to our peer group, our reaction group, to see what their professional opinion was and how they literally reacted to our offerings. And then we, after testing, did another round of experience testing to make sure there was nothing we missed. So this is the entire Agile research process, and the cycle is complete. And it's a good time for questions, I think, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're,
Thank you.
so if you have any questions, go ahead and stand up, and we can walk a mic over to you. I think there's a question over there, I see.
The term Agile has been used in the field of computers for several years and as a whole method of approach to doing software development work. I didn't hear from your discussion a clarification between how that Agile varies from your Agile and how your Agile could contribute to it, to the other Agile, or whether it requires a non-Agile approach to be effective.
Well, thank you for the question. And the core concept behind the Agile research information I shared is it's flexible. You could create your own schedule and create your own research recurring iteration process if you want. But more importantly, it was a series of methods that you could take and have the right tools and approaches to work inside anyone else's agile process. So think of it as two ways. You could create your own process with it, but more importantly, and I think this is the stronger of the two, it gives you the tool belt that I can live in the agile methodology, almost the agile school of thought for how to build software. Because now with agile, you have these iteration cycles and you're trying to work very, very rapid. I now have, regardless of what stage my agile process is in, maybe I'm doing agile design, maybe I'm doing agile development, maybe I'm doing QA sometimes even can have its own agile cycle that they all kind of, it's some kind of strange agile waterfall hybrid I've seen at places. And at the end of the day, we all have our methodologies and our processes, but when I'm in businesses, I find that they start tweaking and changing things just to make sure the rubber meets the road and things get done, right? So at the core, we use the term agile in this response in its most direct and, looking for the right word here, the most literal way in some sense. We literally just want a approach to getting answers that's extremely flexible, extremely fast. It can help me right now. I don't have to set it up and wait 3 weeks kind of thing. I just want to know what can I do now with the problem I'm dealing with today. So that's why we use the term agile here. And it's been designed in such a way so that it's complementary and can work inside agile development processes.
This person can ask a question next.
When doing customer development and understanding how the user is liking or disliking your product that you've created, what would you do? Would you have them blindly test your product, get their feedback on it, or would you have a conversation with them first and ask them what's the problem with their competitors and understand what they envision as a solution, and then stick them in front of the product and get their feedback?
Give me a little context here. Are you imagining you're a startup or you're a large company?
Startup.
Okay, startup. Okay. So what I would do is I'd probably find 3 people and I would give them the untouched virgin approach. Be like, here it is. This is the basic idea. I just want you to play with it for a while and just let me watch you. Then I'd probably take 3 people and I'd say, this is what it is. This is how it works. I'd like you to try and do this workflow, that workflow, and this workflow. And now they have a little more structure. You're biasing and priming them in a specific way, but you know now that you have some kind of objective-oriented approach in their mind. Not programming, but object-oriented. They have a finish line in mind. And then I would probably take another 3 people and give them really kind of more targeted micro tasks in some way. Hey, go and find this, and go to Amazon, find a little gift, add it to your wish list, and manage your wish list, and then share it with this group, and do something really, really, really granular, just to be able to observe someone going through very tight interactions. But at the end of the day, you kind of want to get a breath. You want to do a little bit of each. So.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I'm going to follow that up with how large of a sample size would you go for?
So, if I'm a startup, I would
go for the 9 that you said, or should it be more than that?
What I would really do is I would go for a group of about 3 or 5 every single iteration I do. But I'd also try and wrap up my potential customers in it. So the people I'm talking to about who I want to sell this to, or what it is I'm building, the end user, right? Maybe you're making something that's going to be a free service for anyone to use. But I try and get some of my target audience, but I also try and get some of my reaction group all kind of combined. And it could be, if I'm doing 2 separate groups, I'd probably do 3 to 5 per group per iteration cycle. And if it's just like 2 or 3 people, you probably have like a 1-week iteration cycle in some sense, because you get an idea to build it and you're building it 3 minutes later, right? That kind of thing. So as you get larger, let's say as you get more successful, I would increase the groups a bit, because statistical significance starts to become a little more meaningful, especially like, my company is almost 3 years old now, so I've gone through the cycle, and I've done 6 different startups at this point. At the beginning, you have a hunch, I have an experience, I have some type of professional pain that I want to solve in some way, and I got an idea, and I'm kind of throwing out to some small people and getting ideas back, getting feedback. But as I start to grow it, I need to start communicating how successful this product is to other people who may have meetings, such as investors or other potential large customers. And they're going to say, okay, what's the data say? So as you grow, you should also start to grow your groups, because you can start leveraging their value in different ways.
And one last question.
Yeah.
How granular do you get with that demographic profile? So I'm looking at maybe 35 to 44-year-old male, 50K plus, college educated, no children. And I think that's a little too narrow, probably, right? So how granular do you get, and what do you recommend?
So in the same way that as my company grows, I would grow the size of the groups. As my company grows, I would get more and more narrow with the demographics as well. Just because it again comes to a situation where you want to have more data, it comes down to, and you want to also have more targeted understanding and segmentation options. At the beginning, it's a little beg, borrow, and stealing, because you're trying to do as much as possible with as little as possible. And towards the end, you have a lot of resources available, and you're trying to make the most informed decision. So imagine an hourglass sideways. Yeah.
All right.
There you go.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question. Go ahead.
Yeah. In practice, you're going to go through this pieces of this cycle many, many times, and you're talking about 3 to 5 or more people in each panel.
Yeah.
So to what degree do you need to get fresh people for each of those things? You could run out of your people pretty quickly.
It's true. So that's why at the beginning I put a lot of emphasis on products that help grow that feedback panel, because it's like you're a dragon in a lair guarding your treasure. You're always demanding more virgins to be fed. But at the same time, you also do care about your current users, so you want to bring those back and introduce them and let them see the evolution as well, because they have specialized experience with the product that may allow them to have an insight that you weren't having, and they may share that with you. So it's a bit of a battle of attrition that you hope to be winning. So you're always literally having to farm more people. I mean, my business is built on growing these types of panels for companies, and it's something that you're always doing. Ideally, you do it with software, so that you aren't always doing it, but it's always happening. So that's where services like Ethnio become invaluable. Hopefully, as your product gains more notoriety, your website gets more traffic, and then you can actually get more people as well, and more qualified.
Well, often your customers may be in certain industries and maybe only certain companies, and then it will be hard to find real users. What do you do to find the actual users and not just the managers?
So truthfully, for this approach, and kind of like anything you do in life, if you try to do one challenge the other, there are definitely limiting factors, right? So if I'm making software that's only usable by Oracle database administrators who work inside a secure clean room environment or something like that, right? It gets a lot more difficult. But the idea at the core is there should be some universals that you can test. Communication. You could find people who might not be doing that job, but have some of the education about that job, who could guide you in the right way. But at the end of the day, I've never found a perfect fit shoe. I never owned a pair. But it's about guarding yourself and protecting yourself, but ensuring that you have as much information as you can as quickly as possible. And you won't always have perfect demographic fits, but the point is you tried.
Okay. We've got a phone call coming in from Tracy. Go ahead with your question, please.
Yeah, I have a question regarding some of the probably challenges and the difficulties that you went through when you did the usability testing with users. So could you talk about that?
So just to make sure I heard it clearly, the types of trials and tribulations we encounter when observing user tests being conducted. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. One of the studies my company likes to run, and first, pretty much for anyone, is what we call a comprehension study, where we just find someone who's relatively on target demographic, and we send them to your front page, and we ask them to explain what you do. And those are one of those great moments, because it one, it kills the marketers usually. I'm looking at my director of marketing when I'm saying that. But it really goes home to show you how much visual layout design and wordsmithing is absolutely necessary to building amazing software, right? In some ways, you can have software that does less, but somehow does more because it's communicated clearly how you can use it. So in terms of, we've had some hilarious videos in the past of people trying to explain, how do you use the dongle on Intuit's mobile payment solution. And they're like, well, it's a strange shape. It doesn't even look like it should go on the phone. It's a triangle. How do I attach this to my phone? Things like, interesting things like that. The type of stuff that you would never really take note unless you're able to do some of this testing, ask these questions. Something interesting that we've also come across is if you're designing forms, and this is actually a good bit of knowledge, if you're designing forms, there's actually a statistically proven approach to designing some of the layout of forms. You want to keep it as up and down as possible with the confirmation button at the bottom and as few fields as possible. And you usually want labeling to be either immediately to the left or attached to the top of the form field. But it's things like that, the kind of data we can get by doing lots and lots of user testing. Any other great moments? I can tell you here, and I'll just share this. There's been some great moments for customers as they've gotten to see their audience and demographics in their natural environment. So like you actually do have people on their couch with their cats on their head at home trying to buy things on Amazon kind of thing. And which is great because who here has ever actually seen a usability lab? And this is a roundabout way of talking about that question, but it's on topic. So usability lab, people have seen it. So quite often, large companies will spend millions of dollars on creating a space with a one-way mirror or one-way window. And they'll bring in expensive things like eye trackers. They'll bring in lots of different computer hardware, set up lots of different stations. Sometimes they'll think to bring in a couch and make areas a little more comfortable. But what's been interesting is this has been a very traditional way of gathering data for so long. And it, by definition, or like by the actual approach, it can't be avoided. There's something created that we call lab bias, right? Because I put you into an environment that's totally different than anything you ever see before. And I ask you to say, please act in your normal manner. And I'm going to calculate and measure everything you do, and I'm going to base all my business decisions on it. Which, so I used to work in these labs, and I had to do that for my bosses. And that was part of the reason why I became such a big proponent of remote research. Because I got to allow someone to sit at home in their home office with their own laptop and their own webcam and their own coffee maker nearby, and they have all the tabs and all the IM products or all the other distractions around them that they normally have, and is the scenario that I'm asking them to do something for me, usually with my product or my company. And it's just been able to provide so much more information. And actually what's been interesting is how much bias has been able to be reduced by doing this type of testing remotely, is people don't even feel like they're being measured. They don't feel like they're being watched as we try to learn more about them and build insights about how they'll use our product. And it has led to feedback and insights that we never were ever able to even collect in the lab, things that, responses that we never even heard. And this kind of goes back and is built on an idea, and I'm getting really in-depth here. Who's heard of ethnographic research before? Good, lots of smart ACM people here. So ethnographic research, the idea, I'm going to go into your home and I'm going to start, keeping notes and information on everything you do about who you are and how you do it. So, I'll take notes about, even if they're using my software for Amazon, I'll take notes on how you do things in the kitchen and how you make your meals, just so I can understand you better and what your inspirations would be. And this is a very, very roundabout way of talking about this question, but I wanted to get back to is this remote ability brings some of the great stuff about ethnographic, where people are at home and they're comfortable. And since we also bring it online, it allows us to do something at a speed that's never been achievable before. So even when I started doing remote research manually for the large company I was working for, as I wanted to get out of the lab effectively, but wasn't allowed to really get out of the lab, I was able to work about 15 times faster than my counterparts bringing people to the lab, and I could actually do it with more people too. So I actually started to get some more instead of bringing like 10 people into the lab in a week and asking them questions, I was able to plow through 75 people in a week because I was setting up sessions with my laptop and recording screens and talking to them over the conference phone and doing screen sharing sessions and doing remote moderated testing that way. So it became very, very, very valuable and very impactful and made the power of remote. But that was a very long answer to a very short, nice question.
I think we had another question back here, or did you?
Thank you. My question goes to the other end of the spectrum. I hear, I would like you to elaborate on how you would approach an enterprise level software with an extremely well-defined audience. The only testers will be the customers. There isn't anyone else who knows how to do this stuff. It's a very narrow group, but it's a deep group. And remote testing, because I want to hear how you would use your product to do this specifically, because it is an international crowd and therefore remote testing would be ideal. It's also a product which is, this is the other thing I rarely hear anybody talk about, is I actually don't want virgin users. I want to know how, after they've been using it for a while, how's it going? Think Excel, Adobe Photoshop, and Salesforce. None of those are products that you're going to be a pro with in the first hour. We don't those companies don't expect that. And I don't see much literature on the testing of those, the ongoing testing as the product is mature, but also while that product's being developed. Those products don't get developed in a day. They take months, even in an agile development world. So
Years, even.
Yes,
Years,
exactly. Well, and even if it gets released, even if GA happens after a year, it's probably still going to look pretty different another year after that. So whatever this sparks for you that you want to comment on, I'd be interested in listening.
So the first spark I had, I'm very familiar with that problem because I built a company that was making software for only people who were researchers trapped in a lab in Fortune 500 companies. So I was kind of familiar with that and wanting to see how, why did they stop using it or why did they continue using it and how they start using it in strange ways I wasn't expecting before. So remote's very helpful for one. You're asking specifically with my product, my UI.
And please fold in
Acture, yes. So
yes, feel free because that is another.
So the Acture can come in handy here, especially if you have let's say you're working on version 5 of your product kind of thing. Like let's say you're Photoshop and you're doing CS5 back in the day, right? You have so many previous versions out there. And what's interesting is with something like Acture, I could be creating the experience and interaction design of what I think the next version is going to look like without having finished it yet. And I actually could remotely deliver it to power users across the world. So me personally, I would take Acture, whatever I'm having a question about. Maybe let's say I'm gonna use Photoshop again. Maybe I'm having questions about some of its new filters, or was about a year and a half ago. They had some crazy new features that allowed it actually created content for you based upon other information in the image. But anyway, I would use Acture to create a targeted subset of features I was interested in learning more about. And then I would host it online with their ActShare product. And then I would use my own product, YouEye, which can record desktop-based software, not just web software. It's actual native recording on the system. And what I would do is run them through a number of workflows while I was recording their screen and asking them to use these products on ActShare and be able to be reviewing these recordings. Actually, so we get some really interesting data back as well. We have some technology that allows us to report different types of reactions and aggregate them. We've done some work with webcam eye tracking and emotion recognition as well and trying to bring the technology from the lab into our product. But in this situation, I would grow my feedback group of people who've been using it for years and maybe fans, or if you have information on people who may be on the edge of jumping to another product for some reason, I would find that group as well. People who complained a bit, I would incentivize them to be like, hey, they're not all going to say yes, but I'd say, hey, we want you involved with making this product better. I'm going to even incentivize you maybe to use my product longer, and can you be engaged in some of these sessions? And then I would tell them in a very sincere way, it's, in worst case scenario, you can just yell and scream at me about how this is awful, and I will listen. So that's helpful. And again, it's also about doing enough of it all the time, because even though your product doesn't change, your audience does, because the world around them and the competitors are still doing different products, or there's a new player out there in some way, shape, or form, or they found a way to do it themselves. So that's one of the reasons you always have to be testing, because you may stay static and your executives may say, well, we didn't change anything, why do we have to test? Well, it's like, well, we didn't change, but the rest of the world did. So we may need to find out how they're reacting to us now. So I think the veteran testing is actually something that's really, really necessary for products that have been in the market a while, and Axure and a product like YouEye would be perfectly paired in doing that remotely, especially across the world. Yeah.
Okay. So I see we have another question, but just a minute. I wanted to get a question in if I could.
Oh.
You talk about user groups of like 3 or 6 or 9 getting up larger.
Mm-hmm.
Then what's an example of a large group, and how do you manage that? You mentioned 75. What's the biggest size you've gotten up to, and how is managing those groups different?
Yeah, so what's
for
also
both
interesting,
people and like analyzing the data and understanding. In the very beginning, you mentioned a lot about empathy and
Yeah.
understanding the customer as well.
So at the beginning, it's very much about letting your core team members review some of these videos and build their own observational insights and attachment. That's the empathy part. You want to feel attached. You want to feel like this person. So that's where just a few small videos are important at the beginning, because you don't want to take up too much of their time, but you want to make them feel like they're connected. But as the company grows and as you transition to needing to have well-informed decisions, even like our product and a lot of the products out there, it grows to, I need to start using some of these tools to aggregate data for me. Like the surveys are a simple way that, so I can aggregate multiple choice questions. I can aggregate some of the feedback on a Likert scale, so I can get quantified qualitative information. And the largest, I'm going to qualify this in some way. So what's interesting is, let's say we take a single feature and we're going through an agile process and we're actually doing iterations on it because we're getting feedback each time when we're making changes. And we've been in a situation where by the time that a feature actually gets fully released, each iteration had 25 participants for each. So there was some key video moments that were reviewed. All the videos were reviewed by a few people. They found the key moments and they released them out.
A different 25 or the same 25 following?
It depends on the situation. Both has happened, depending on what you want to do and what you want to find out. Quite often a different 25 each time, ideally.
That's the sacrificing virgins to the family.
Yeah, exactly. He's very hungry. But by the time that feature is actually fully released publicly, there were 7 iteration cycles. So that's 25, 25, 25, 25. There's 100, another 70, then 70. Oh wait, there was 25 person, another 75 on top of that. So at the end of it, I literally ran 175 people through the evolution of this feature to ensure the quality of this feature at the end. And that's not big data. That's not 100,000 visitors kind of situation.
But I mean, just to manage all the people as a project, I mean, that's a lot of effort.
And that's part of why I started my company, is because I needed software to be able to do that.
To scale.
To scale. So essentially to magnify my efforts, so that my 1 hour could, instead of just being 1 hour of me with a notebook writing everything down, could be 1 hour of me and getting effectively what used to be 20 hours of me. So software has been able to do so much, and the remote has been able to do so much as well. Amplifying, having a few people being able to support. I mean, what's interesting is some of our customers' companies, they'll have a research team. I'm talking massive e-commerce companies that you guys see every single, like the brick and mortar version on the side of the street every single day. They'll literally just have a team of 8 researchers supporting a 100-person product team, and they're doing multiple different products. So when we come in and we bring our software, and it allows those 8 people and maybe another 1 or 2 persons added in to be able to now support all these 100 different people with information and insights, which they couldn't even do before. It was the point where this research group was actually ignoring the 100 product people in their requests for information because they were focused on trying to get research and deliver to executives because
Oh, okay.
yeah,
They were the limiting pipe as opposed to the people feeding
and they
them.
didn't want to be. It's like it actually caused them a lot of pain that they couldn't answer these questions for their team members because there's just too many of them and they don't have the bandwidth. But that's what our software allows them to do finally. Is, they can provide research both down the ladder and up the ladder.
Okay, very good.
Anyway.
Thanks. I think there was a question over here with the mic.
How was UI conceived, and what would you like it to be when it grows up and, say, at various stages, maybe 5 years out, 10 years out? What is your short and long-term vision for UI?
So it was a hot summer's night. No, actually, there's a very funny story, not funny, but a very appropriate story for how the idea was conceived. And I was actually in Chicago. I was working for a healthcare startup at the time. And I went to a conference. Some of you guys may have heard of it before. It's, actually, I'm drawing a blank at the moment, to tell you the truth. I went to a technology conference and I listened to this fellow named Luke Robolewski. He used to be head of design for Yahoo back in the early aughts. And he was talking about website design and using eye tracking in labs and getting statistical information about literally different designs and layouts and how they were more effective from an e-commerce sense. And I was sitting there and he was talking about the price of doing this in terms of time and money. And he spent $100,000 and he spent 8 weeks of time and he flew all the way to the UK to go to this special laboratory and they ran 100 people through this and they got this data set back and they started drawing conclusions. And it just struck me like a lightning bolt. I was like, I know that company. I've worked in those labs before. I've done this manually before. I was like, why are we doing this in person still? We're testing things that are online. People are online. Why don't we just start connecting them? And if we want high technology, why don't we just start instrumenting the hardware that's already out there? We have webcams. Why couldn't I turn a 35-cent webcam into a $200,000 eye tracker? Why was that impossible? Or why couldn't I get 70% of its value? So that was the moment. And where I would like to really take UI is to be able to, one, in this year and the next year, is be able to really solve that problem of research teams and bring Agile research to the entire market, to our entire technology community, to the online world and the mobile world. This concept that we can have a question this morning and have answers at the end of the day that are meaningful and data-driven. Now, what I'd really like to build in the future, and I don't want to go too far out there, is I like to take that process we've developed that has some human hands in it, and I like to start getting even more big data involved with it and seeing trends and really turn it into what I call experience analytics. And that's really the big vision of where I'm going to take UI. So that's as much as I can tell you.
I think there was a question up here.
I think there's time for just one more question. Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about how many respondents have went through UI, how many have that went through, how many have signed up, and how many are like survey rats, if you will?
So we don't refer to them as rats. We call them. We call our competitors. So the situation you're talking about is the phrase we use, a professional tester. How do you avoid professional testers? Or how do you want a professional tester? Because they do, like all things, they have the pros and cons, right? Sometimes I may want, it's kind of like your heuristic review, someone who's done enough and seen enough that they may actually have an opinion to share that's valued. But for us, we have a very dedicated, we call them a sourcing team, which they go and source people across the world. And they actually, if you're familiar with TaskRabbit, there's actually a very kind of thorough interview process to understand, is this person actually a good communicator? Can they follow the instructions? They're not just picked up off the field. They're not delivered out of a Mechanical Turk kind of situation. They're real humans that other real humans have connected with, and they've said, yes, we want to be part of this community. So we've grown this over 2 years, and we've partnered up with companies that have built similar groups, and we've brought it all together. And it's actually one of our key differentiators. Our customers are always surprised and very happy with the quality of our participants and how they always seem to be, that was the real demographic, that's who I wanted. And we even will handle special requests. We may need more time and money to do so, but we'll let you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I had a little bit of wrap-up announcements about ACM. So just remember, sfbayacm.org is our website. We have 2 free events a month, talks like this general computing series and also in the data mining series. So I'd like to thank the many volunteers that helped out. So the Palo Alto Media Center here, also the ACM volunteers, and also UCSC are some of the people that have helped us out. So remember, www.sfbayacm.org. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So,